Chapters 15 and 16. Chapter 15. Good Cops. The incident with the snake. I hardly gave it thought at first. There were so many other things on my mind, and nothing had come of it. We hadn't been hurt. Even the snake was safe as Bert's new pet. It was a strange prank to pull, but that's all I thought it was. I'd even considered it hadn't been left for me at all but for Percy. There was no reason yet to think otherwise. The fruitless search for the bodies of Marie's mother and stepfather had distracted Pilson for a short time, but it wasn't long before he listened to the interview tapes and heard me say the words, blood drinker. I had to come clean after that. I expected to be pulled off the case immediately, but when I told my dad, he just nodded quietly like he'd expected she would say something like that. Pilson, on the other hand, came down like a thunderstorm. I was there when he questioned her, and I never heard such shouting from inside the interrogation room from he and Marie alike. If you don't stop with these wild stories, I'll drag you back in front of a judge. Go ahead and do it then, because this is the only story I have to tell. I felt for Pilson at first. I really did. Even if he went about it poorly, and even if his motivation wasn't exactly pure, he was still after the truth just like the rest of us. If only there'd been an easier way to get it. In the old days, people used to believe that the corpses of murder victims would bleed if brought into the presence of their killers. But not even that would have worked in the case of Marie Hill, as those bodies had not a drop left. I hung back with my dad near his office, while Pilson had his go at Marie. And I remember how intently he listened to what was going on inside the interrogation room, how he seemed poised on the balls of his feet, ready to intervene if it went too far. I told him that maybe the interviews were a mistake. Maybe she really is just stalling. Maybe the only reason she chose me was because she thought she could get one over on someone her own age. Does Marie strike you as a liar? He asked, and I thought about it hard for the 100th time. No, sir. She doesn't strike me as one either. We don't know what she went through. If she's hiding something, she's not hiding it from you so much as herself. He stared at me at the interrogation room door. Keep going for as long as she wants to, he said, for as long as they'll let us. When Pilson came out, he snapped his fingers at my dad and directed us into his office. That raised my eyebrows, but my dad took a deep breath and patted me on the shoulder, his way of saying it was fine, that Mr. Pilson was upset, and we should let that one pass. We joined him in my dad's office and shut the door. He had his hands on his hips and was staring at the wall, brow creased deep. Look at this, he pointed to my father's calendar, a monthly of paintings of white-tailed deer. The month of October was blank except for a few scribbled appointments and large black X's crossing off the days. You've had her in your custody for weeks, and all you have is a made-up story about a dead mother and a lot of rambling about a movie monster in a cave and fake teeth. No new leads, nothing. Look at these. He slapped his palm against the marked dates. Wasted days. My dad crossed his arms. He had a cup of coffee in his hand and raised it towards the calendar. You know what I see when I look at that, Mr. Pilson? All those X's? What's that? Relief. Pilson turned. I see days when no one has died, my dad went on. No bodies found. Well, you know what I see? Pilson asked. He tore the calendar off its nail and tossed it at my dad's feet. I see a murderer getting away. He walked past us and left the station without another word to anyone, leaving my dad to pick up the calendar and poke a new hole for the nail. I asked Marie once why she insisted on antagonizing Pilson so badly, but she only shrugged and said that with a man like him, there was no winning anyway. That even if every victim had turned up alive again, she would always be guilty. Guilty of wasting his time, guilty of being poor, of being a girl. She said from the moment she met him, she could tell that all he wanted was to find a way to strap her into Nebraska's electric chair. But the joke was on him, because she requested hanging. Chapter 16. Pilson. I can't recall if I disliked Benjamin Pilson on sight. He had a clean-cut, good-looking face and carried himself with confidence. He looked like you would expect a DA to look. Maybe he styled himself after the ones in the movies, or maybe they styled themselves after him. I do know that almost every single night I learned about him subsequent to that first impression made me like him less. Now maybe I hated him, so I guess I could have hated him from the start. I was picking up cough syrup for Dawn at Anderson's drugstore one day when he approached me in the street. "Michael," he said, "I've been meaning to buy you lunch. Where in town can we get a good cheeseburger?" I took him a few blocks over to a Sportsman's Cafe. I didn't have the best cheeseburgers, but they were decent, and it was close, and I didn't want to spend any more time in his company than I had to. We slid into one of the cream-colored booths, and he ordered 2 cheeseburgers with fries, a soda for him, and a vanilla milkshake for me. I resented the milkshake. It seemed like he was trying to point at my youth. But maybe that was unfair. Either way, my mother raised me to be polite, so I drank every drop and ate the cherry too. For a while we talked about innocuous things. He asked me about school and what position I played on the baseball team. I asked him how long he'd been the DA in Lincoln. His easy way actually felt genuine, even though I knew it was practiced. Putting people at ease one minute only to knock them off balance the next is something even our DA knew how to do. So I knew what he was doing when he rolled up his sleeves and loosened his expensive necktie. "Your recorded conversations with Marie Catherine Hale have been interesting." "They have," I said. "Shadowy figures, Cape monsters in the dark." He flashed a grin. How ridiculous were the tales of this lying girl. "It's not exactly what she said. She said he had tricks and that he drank the blood." Pilson shrugged. "Same difference." "How are you going to get her to drop that nonsense?" he asked. "My dad says maybe I shouldn't, that I should let her tell it her way and sort it out after." Pilson smiled. It was a mean smile, no mirth at all, just condescension, and it made me feel small. He wiped his mouth with his napkin and placed it over his plate, then pushed his plate to the edge of the table. "But your dad isn't the interviewer, is he?" "You are." "Yes, sir." "Since the judge has seen fit to place the integrity of the entire case on the shoulders of a high school student." He reached into his briefcase and produced files not dissimilar to those I'd seen fanned out across my father's desk. They were the files on the Nebraska bloodless murders, Peter Knupp and Angela Hawk and Beverly Nordahl. One by one he opened them on the table before my plate of half-eaten burger and fries. "Have you seen the photos of the Carlson's family's bodies yet?" he asked. "No." "Don't you think you should?" I knew I should, but I hadn't had the heart. "We aren't to that part of the interview. I want the details to be fresh." "Well," he said, and clearly didn't believe me, "you've got to be nearly to these, so have a look." He threw me a pile of photographs. Peter Knupp was splayed face down. A close-up of his face showed open eyes and parted lips. The expression conveyed no fear. It didn't convey much of anything, which was somehow worse. Pilson moved the photo of his face to reveal pictures of the wounds that killed him. Cuts, deep and smooth, opened at the edges to show the layers of skin and flesh and vein. The cut to his thigh had been done through his trousers, and the edges of the fabrics were stained dark. The cut at his neck was short and narrower than the others, and the angle of the photo focused less on it than on his face, for which I was grateful. I'd never seen a dead body before. It was nothing like I imagined, and the vanilla milkshake sat uneasy in my stomach. "Why are you showing me these?" I asked. "So you remember," he said. He opened the files on the student nurses. "I remember," I said. "Then why are you letting her lie? Here." He moved my plate and pushed the photographs towards me so far I had to grab them to keep them from falling into my lap. Angela Hawk and Beverly Nordahl were seated in the front bucket seats of Angela's car. Their throats had been cut, and small rivulets of blood escaped down into their collars. Beverly's head tilted towards Angela's as if she was trying to provide comfort. "The M.E. estimated they died within minutes of each other," Pilson said. "They look like they were killed while they were unconscious, don't they? Except they weren't. No traces of sedatives, no intoxicants found besides the alcohol in a bottle of beer. No ligature on the throat, no signs of asphyxia, no blows to the head, and if you look close you can see that Angela's eyes are open." I didn't want to look close. "They suffered," he said. "Every one. Have you ever watched someone bleed to death, Michael?" "No, sir." "Marie Hale was involved in this." He turned one of the photos of Angela and Beverly to look at it. "Maybe she was even in the car." She didn't kill them, I said, but the blood had drained from my head. I could see Marie crouched in the back of that car. I could see her leaned across the bodies. Maybe she didn't do the cutting, he said. Or maybe you don't want to believe she did. She's a pretty girl, Michael. What does that have to do with anything? Just that you're a young man, and she's using that. You don't know if she's using anything. Maybe she's confused. My dad says, your dad is not the most experienced interviewer, though, is he? How many murderers do you think your dad has questioned? I don't know, I said, even though I knew the answer was none. My cheeks burned. Had I opened my mouth to say something else, I might have cried out of sheer frustration, or I might have hit him. As it happened, I didn't need to do either, because Mr. McBride had been watching it and decided to step in. Oh, I don't know about that, Mr. McBride said. The things our sheriff has seen might surprise you. And besides, I don't know that you have any advantage to press over him. Lincoln might be the capital of Nebraska, but it isn't exactly New York City. He held out his hand. Matt McBride, I'm the editor of the local paper. Pilson shook it. As quickly as he laid them out, he swept the photos back into his files. I've been meaning to make your acquaintance, Mr. McBride said. See how you're liking the place. Maybe get a quote on the case for the Star. Sure, Pilson said. I'll stop by your offices one of these days. He never did, of course. Pilson saved his quotes for the bigger papers. Great, you stop by too, Michael. Any time. Mr. McBride waited for me to nod to tell him I was okay. Then he tipped his hat and walked to the lunch counter for a cup of coffee. Friend of yours? Pilson asked, staring into his back. I delivered papers for him this summer. That's good, Pilson smiled. But, Michael, if you speak to him about this case, I'll press charges against you faster than you can slap a fly. Yes, sir. And don't forget, he said as he gathered his things, the man who killed these people has to pay, and Marie Hale will have to pay too for standing by and letting him. What if she couldn't stop him, I asked. What if she tried? I need a name, he said as if that didn't matter. I need his name or she dies.